In the empire of Actylos, many heirs are born, and only the strongest are placed on the throne. This means that they die killing each other, and whoever survives becomes emperor. The youngest of the emperor's children and the youngest participant in this bloody ceremony, a 13-year-old prince, killed all his sisters and brothers. He tied the hair on the heads of all of them, and dragging them along, came to the previous ruler. The emperor, touched by the younger prince's strength, was happy and wanted to praise him, but at the same moment, a sword plunged into his chest. The young prince, smiling innocently in front of his father's eyes, who was coughing up blood, said that he was very bored waiting. He wanted to get the throne right away, and besides, he was infuriated that someone was superior to him. And now he is the current emperor of Actylos, Raniero Actylos. Angelica stands at the marriage altar next to the emperor, as she was sold to this tyrant as a bride. The priest asks them to seal the union with a kiss, and looking at Raniero, the girl wonders why he looks so different. However, he suddenly smiles ominously, glad that Angelica has finally opened her eyes. Otherwise, a little more and he would be bored. In fact, all this happens in the novel, where Angelica moved right at the episode of the wedding with the emperor. The main character of the novel, the goddess Seraphine, is a true flower that blossomed in the Actylos Empire. Before meeting the goddess, Emperor Raniero was always preoccupied with thoughts of absorbing territories. In Seraphina's clear eyes, he saw his image stained with blood, and he began to feel strong feelings for her, love and hatred. Raniero steals her from the temple and brings her to the empire, where he intends to make her one like him, but instead she becomes even more beautiful. The emperor's obsession grew even stronger, and he killed Seraphina's first love, the knight Eden. The goddess breaks down and loses control, and Raniero loses his head. In addition to them, there were other characters in the novel, but Angelica fell into the body of the empress, who was like a shadow in it. Since divorce is not possible in the Actylos Empire, and it is possible to remarry only after the death of the spouse, having stolen the goddess Raniero, returning from the temple, first of all, cut off the head of his wife. And so Angelica got into the body of the empress, who lost her head at the very beginning of the novel. She has read many novels about hits, but usually they possess villains and save themselves by not doing the actions of the antagonist. Finding no other way out, Angelica decides that on the day Raniero goes to the temple, she will fake her death and run away. She rejoices at the idea that came to her, because the emperor will not check if she is dead, because he killed her only to make the goddess his wife. Until then, she decides to pretend that she does not exist at all and less catch Raniero's eye. Thinking about all this, Angelica does not even notice how the emperor suddenly appears in front of her. With an evil grin, he asks how long the girl is going to do not see him and ignore his presence. Angelica instantly replies that she could not have shown him such disrespect. Taking an awkward step, she accidentally steps on the hem of her dress and falls, sprawled on the floor. Although she is ashamed of the fall, she is glad that she answered his question quickly, because Raniero hates things when things happen slowly. Several servants even lost their heads because they were not quick enough to correct what the emperor did not like. Stepping on her dress, Raniero smiles maliciously, giving the empress a chance to explain herself. Angelica, in her justification, came up with the idea that she had a chronic disease, from which she lost consciousness with her eyes open. Noticing that he has a hard time believing such an excuse, she adds that Raniero has such a strong aura that a small person like her couldn't stand it. When asked if it is his fault, she immediately wriggles out, explaining that no one blames the sun if he looks at it for a long time and goes blind. The emperor wonders if she is going to not look him in the face for the rest of her life, because she will fall. Trying to find the right answer as quickly as possible, Angelica asks him for permission to look at him and looks up. Raniero is pleased with his choice of the empress, who does not show excessive pride, prostrates herself before him and responds instantly. Grabbing her by the throat, he promises to reward her with an answer to any question she asks him, realizing that even her question now depends on her life. If he does not like him, Angelica asks why he chose her. However, Raniero is disappointed with the question. He considers it uninteresting, banal, and conservative. The emperor is afraid of going mad from boredom while answering him, but Angelica receives mercy, since he promised to answer her. When Raniero announced his marriage, so many aristocrats and kings sent portraits of their daughters that they filled the entire room. He ordered the portraits to be hung on the wall, and then sat down on a pouf at the foot of the bed and threw a dagger at the wall. Raniero is amused by the memory of the blade hitting Angelica's left eye, and he takes back his words about the boring answer. But his mood immediately changes, and propping up the girl's chin with the toe of his shoe, he advises her to try harder. Otherwise, he promises to kill her, and Angelica promises him to correct herself and be more interesting. Raniero leaves the room, and leaning right on the floor, the girl is glad that the wedding day went well and she has not yet been killed. In the morning, Angelica wakes up from the Emperor's touch under the blanket to her body and jumps up. Raniero is unhappy that she slept until 9 o'clock and calls her lazy. Dressing, he calls her banal, boring, monotonous, and completely uncolorful, and leaves the bedroom. The maid suggests that the Empress begin her morning preparations with a bath, and the girl agrees. Since Raniero called her boring and monotonous, she hopes that he will not come to her again. Angelica needs to find a way to escape, and she learns from the maid that today is the 19th of May. The Emperor met Seraphine at the Temple of Tunia in a frosty winter, which meant that the fateful moment was still about 7 months away. Until last night, the girl remembered nothing about Angelica except for her name, but gradually the memories of her body began to penetrate her mind. Angelica is the second princess of the Onro Kingdom. She has an older brother and sister and a younger brother. She was a member of the royal family, which meant that she had to study the basics of history and geography, which would help her with the decision of where to escape. The frontier of the country to which she would flee should not be too far from the palace, and she should not be at enmity with the empire. It is necessary that the security there is not too strict, and it does not matter whether this country is rich and strong or weak. After all, in the spring, after the collapse of the emperor, the country, the entire system of which relied on an outstanding ruler, will be destroyed. At breakfast, Angelica notices how the ladies-in-waiting keep their distance and thinks it's good. After all, she does not need to get close to them as she is planning an escape, and in this case, unexpected problems may arise. However, to begin with, the girl decides to behave as naturally as possible, portraying a good empress. She asks the ladies-in-waiting what their names are, and the eldest introduces herself as the mother of the Marquise Jaxiu. The younger one is Mayran, the wife of the Count of Lac, and Angelica is surprised that both of these women are from prominent families. She does not understand why they feel so awkward in front of her, and in order to brighten her up, she asks to help her get used to the castle. The Empress is interested in the schedule and learns that there is no official plan for today, so she can rest. Since Angelica still has 7 months ahead of her, she decides to accept the offer, but all the following days she receives the same answer. Now the girl understands the reason for this awkwardness. The ladies-in-waiting avoid her because it is nonsense that the Empress does not have a schedule. Thinking about the best thing for her to do, she remembers that her heroine Angelica brought with her from her homeland a servant girl named Saizen. And so, in the morning, over tea, the Empress asks the Marquise where the maid is and why she is not seen at all. As far as Jaxi knows, Saizen is undergoing training to become a suitable maid of honor for Actelos. Angelica does not mind the maid being trained, but she finds it strange that she, as a hostess, does not know anything about her. The Marquise thought that since the Empress had not asked about Saizen, she must have been aware of the matter. Realizing that she is a rather slippery woman, Angelica decides to act differently and, apologizing, admits her mistake. Knowing that it is not pride that feeds her, but purpose, the girl decides to bow down first and asks again with a smile if she can see Saizen. Sitting at home with her son, the Marquise Jaquise vomits and throws up, because the Empress turned out to be not such a fool as it seemed to her at first. The woman is annoyed that some snot from a small kingdom dares to argue with her. Her daughter Sylvia, who came to the noise to find out what happened, enters the room. The Marquise is sure that she would not have had to suffer so much if only Sylvia had become Empress. She is offended that the family missed the girl's marriageable age, expecting the Emperor to choose her. Sylvia asks her mother not to hate Angelica so much because the Emperor himself chose her, and asks her brother to say something too. However, the Marquise does not want to listen to anything. She is furious that she had to wait so long for nothing, lowering the value of her daughter. Unable to withstand her aggression, Sylvia runs away from the room in tears, and the Marquis asks her mother not to worry so much. He is the Deputy Minister of Finance and, being close to the Emperor, he is sure that he himself will get rid of his wife as soon as they provide him with a suitable reason. Realizing that they only need a pretext, the mother and son Jaxiu decide to simply whisper to the Emperor in time about Angelica's shortcomings. After all, Raniero observes the rule that everything that can harm the country is immediately destroyed, and all that is needed is a small installation. The country is now in the period of budget approval, and the funds of all institutions are being approved by both the Emperor and the Empress. But Angelica is not doing business at all now, and anyone will say that this interferes with the prosperity of Actylos. After Saison's return, a few days passed very quietly because this maid really knew her mistress very well. Though the chief lady-in-waiting, the Marquise of Jaxiu, continued to ignore the Empress, she decided not to react. However, now Angelica understands that this could not have been done because she was summoned by the Emperor, and this is clearly the tricks of the ladies-in-waiting. Not understanding who came with them to Raniero, Angelica decides to bow to him lower than her companions, just in case. The visitor turned out to be the Marquis Jaxiu, who had prepared a budget project for the Emperor for the third quarter. The Marquis reports a problem with funds for the Empress's palace. Raniero is impressed by Angelica's courage because he thought that she approved too much money for her palace. However, the Marquis suddenly reports that the Empress did not actually look after the palace, but indulged in entertainment. According to him, she did not show any desire to perform her duties, and an employee was found who conducted business on her behalf. Angelica realizes that all this time, the Marquis did not give her anything to do on purpose to arrange this whole circus. According to the Marquis, the expenses for entertainment were added to everything, and although the officials pretended not to see it, he himself could not stand aside. Although the man's words were lies, the girl has no way to prove that she is not lying. All this time, the Marquis has isolated Angelica, and only Saison can take her side in the palace. When the Emperor asks what Jaxiu wants now, the guy replies that he has no hidden intentions. He insists on his loyalty to the imperial family and leaves all decisions to Raniero himself. The girl does not understand how these people are trying to convince the Emperor with such a dull excuse. Angelica notices the look on Raniero's face, which seems to be telling her to come up with something before the Emperor gets angry with boredom. She says that her heart aches that the Emperor is forced to deal with routine, although the budget project could have been agreed with her. To express her remorse to the Emperor, she offers him entertainment that will cheer up Raniero. At the interested look of the Emperor, Angelica suggests that he arrange a hunt for a man. As prey, the girl offers all three standing in front of him, which terrifies the Jaxi family. The book talked about hunting people, and Angelica knew that this idea would interest Raniero. However, she needed to save herself, so she reminds the Emperor of her chronic illness. Angelica explains that hunting her is like hunting a sick rabbit. It is not interesting at all. When asked if she is trying to avoid the fate of the prey in this way, the girl promises to train and become a worthy prey by winter. The Marquis is angry with Angelica. He considers her idea to be complete nonsense and an unreasonable proposal. Taking the situation into her own hands, the girl accuses Jackie of not initially informing her about the budget. Thus, the Marquis should take it as an honor to become a prey, because of this, the Emperor spent so much time on a routine matter. The girl's monologue ends with applause from Raniero, who is obviously pleased with such an empress. The Marquis asks not to subject his old mother to such cruelty and to entrust it only to him. The Emperor orders that the opportunity to try one's honor by becoming a prey for his pleasure should not be called cruelty. Raniero, snapping his fingers and calling the guards, agrees with Angelica that the fault lies with all three of them. In his opinion, the Empress is guilty of not being able to stop the Marquis and his mother from coming to annoy him, and they are guilty of trying to use the Emperor to resolve personal animosity towards his wife. Raniero guessed that this could happen, because the Marquis's younger sister had not been chosen for the role of his bride. He knew everything, but let the situation take its course, because he had no reason to pay attention to such personal greed. Wondering if Sylvia could be the same empress, Raniero approaches Angelica and, lifting her face, kisses her. Noting that the girl does not make mistakes, he picks her up in his arms and asks if she can avoid them forever. The next day, there was a change in the Empress's palace. the marquise became a prey and left the place of the chief lady-in-waiting. For the maids of the Actylos Empire, this position was burdensome, and the post was given to Saizen. After the change of the chief lady-in-waiting and a series of incidents in the palace, everyone stopped underestimating the Empress. Since Angelica did not begin her activities in high society, she began to be perceived as a soulless and proud empress. Although she was worried about these rumors, she began to do the work of the Empress, which made her very busy. One day, leaving the castle, Angelica sees a girl standing in the courtyard and asks who it is. From the servant, she learns that she is the younger sister of Henry Jaxiu. "Pray on the hunt for people, Sylvia." The girl came to the castle to ask for an audience with the Empress. Angelica does not understand why Sylvia has come only now, because the fate of her family was sealed a few days ago. As it turned out, the girl has been standing here for several days, immediately after the punishment was approved. Angelica agrees to accept Sylvia, and the girl respectfully introduces herself to her. The Empress regrets that she had to wait so long, but immediately declares that it is impossible to cancel the punishment. However, to her surprise, the girl declares that her loved ones got what they deserved. Falling on her knees in front of Angelica, Sylvia asks to take her to work, since after her stupid mother leaves, the place of a maid has become free. The Empress does not understand why the child of her enemy wants to serve her. Perhaps she's going to lie low, watching her and waiting for the right moment to attack and avenge her mother and brother. Sylvia explains that she was raised in such a way that she could become a companion for the Emperor and a maid of honor and companion for the Empress. For most of her life, she was locked up at home. She has no influence, and now that family members have fallen as prey, she has nowhere to go. Of course, Sylvia's heart aches for her family because they are her relatives, even despite the way they treated her. However, without holding back tears, the girl admits that first of all, she wants to live. Lying in bed before going to bed, Angelica thinks that the only one whose heart has not been touched by the image of Sylvia is Raniero. But this is not a situation where the decision can be made out of compassion, because there is a possibility that the girl hates her. Getting out of bed, Angelica goes out onto the balcony to breathe fresh air and clear her thoughts. Suddenly, Raniero appears in front of her, and the girl screams in surprise. Angelica asks why he is here, but the Emperor sees no need for a reason to visit his wife. He asks the girl how her day went, and he says that he is pleased that his prey has started training. Raniero decided to add 2 rules to the game: give the prey weapons, and if they hold out for 3 hours, they will be released. The Emperor asks again how Angelica's day went, and she is about to tell him about Sylvia. Before she can say anything, Raniero advises her to accept the girl, finding it interesting. He offers to send Sylvia to the hunting grounds as a hunter to kill her mother and brother and prove her loyalty to Angelica. The Empress is surprised at how easily he understood the reason for her doubts, but the doubts of ordinary people are obvious to him. Raniero offers to accept the girl for the role of a maid of honor, on the condition that she copes with the role of a hunter. Angelica agrees. But noticing her hesitation, the Emperor hands her a glass and promises that he himself will give the order for Sylvia. He smiles, considering the Empress weak and incapable of even uttering such an order herself. Raniero Actylos was born a man, but he is closer to a divine being who mistakes people for insects. There is no unfortunate story from childhood that made him become so cruel. He was simply born pure evil. Suddenly, he pours a glass of wine on Angelica and declares her extraordinary cowardice. The Emperor invites the girl to forget about fear for a while when she is immersed in pleasure. And this image of absolute dominant evil, more beautiful and stronger than anyone else, grabs her and throws her on the bed. Lying next to her, Raniero talks about how small and weak Angelica is and she needs to be a good prey. The girl remembers her promise to the Emperor, but in fact she does not have the slightest desire to become prey. She would stall for time, and when Raniero went on a military campaign, she would immediately run away, and he, having met Seraphine, would not even look for her. The Emperor suddenly remembers the second rule he added to hunting. He wants Angelica to participate as a hunter too. Raniero believes that she does not need to worry, because the prey cannot harm the hunter according to the rules. But Angelica is sure that the mother and son Jackie, unable to escape, will not miss the chance to take her with them to the next world. And although Raniero himself introduced all these rules, he understands perfectly well that they do not matter at all. The hunt is scheduled for the solstice, which is less than a month away. Angelica intended to establish relations with aristocrats before the holiday, but for the sake of survival, she canceled all social events. As a hunter, she was allowed to come to the parade ground and watch the training of the prey. In the Actelos Empire, all the inhabitants are trained in martial arts, so that women and children can take part in the war if anything happens. According to Angelica's maid of honor, Duchess Nirma, until yesterday, jackies were lazy in training. However, everything changed after they were visited by the Emperor, who apparently informed them of the new rules. For Angelica, they are looking for the best teacher, and the girl expresses a desire to learn shooting. If it gets into range, it will lose, so it needs to keep its distance from prey. The Empress asks Nirma to teach her how to shoot the weapon that shoots farthest. Starting to practice archery, Angelica complains about the weight of the weapon, which surprises the lady-in-waiting, because even children hold the bow. Pulling herself together, the girl rises, takes a bow, and arrows in her hands and aim, hoping to hit at least not far from the target. The Emperor summoned Sylvia to talk about her desire to become Angelica's maid of honor. He informs her of the condition that the girl must become a hunter at the solstice festival. Frustrated by the expected reaction of surprise on her face, Raniero orders the guards to take Sylvia away. From his assistant, the Emperor learns that Angelica has canceled all social events in order to learn archery. He calls her a coward with a smirk, and then learns that the girl has lost consciousness. Waking up in bed, Angelica grumbles under her breath, because it seemed to her that her heroine, being a princess, should have undergone at least some training and be more enduring. As if out of nowhere, Raniero appears, wondering why the girl speaks as if she has no memories of her own childhood. Upon learning that the Emperor has come to see her, after learning of the loss of consciousness, Angelica thanks him for his concern. Raniero sees that the girl is still pale and thinks she is stupid because she doesn't know to rest when you're tired. Obviously, the inhabitants of this country are simply unaware that people can simply be weak. Crying, Angelica explains to Raniero that she knows about the need for rest, but is just trying very hard not to die. He smiles, declares that the Empress will not die, and orders the maid to bring cold water and a towel. Raniero puts a towel on Angelica's forehead, but he quickly gets bored with taking care of her, and he calls for help from the lady-in-waiting. Noticing how the Emperor sat down in the chair, the girl feels danger, because his movements clearly indicate boredom. Angelica asks the Duchess to bring food, and after 10 minutes, Raniero feeds the Empress with a spoon, surprised at how little she eats. The Emperor needs the girl to train well and not become a victim of prey, because otherwise he will not be able to hunt her in winter. According to the Empress, it is for this purpose that she is looking for a good mentor for training. When he learns that Angelica has not yet found a coach, he decides to start teaching her himself. She gratefully accepts his offer and promises to try to become a good hunter. Waking up in the morning, the Empress feels much better. The potion that Raniero gave her helped a lot. He gave her a medicine that put her into a deep sleep, sat by her side all night, and left only at dawn. Angelica asks Sisson when the Emperor summoned her to the training ground and, upon learning that the maid does not know, gets angry. Quickly getting ready so as not to anger him with a late appearance, she runs to the parade ground. No sooner had she rejoiced that the Emperor was not yet there than she heard his voice behind her, displeased with her late awakening. Raniero is surprised by the girl's bow, which resembles a child's toy, but she explains that she does not yet have the strength to pull the bowstring. The Emperor gives her a bow suitable for her build, and it seems to her even lighter and more comfortable than the previous one. After an hour of training, Raniero announces the 67th time that Angelica could have died from the same attack. The Emperor got bored with target shooting after half an hour. He brought wooden swords and began a fencing lesson. Without teaching her theory and basics, he immediately moved on to Spartan training, declaring the presence of many weaknesses in the girl. Angelica is defeated again and again. The Emperor wonders why she misses all his attacks. She explains that the problem may not be her, but that Raniero is too fast. As a result, the Emperor began to explain to Angelica in detail the basics of battle. Although he was grumbling at the girl's slow movements, it didn't look like he wanted to stop practicing. Angelica does not understand why Raniero, who was bored by everything, still continued training. She thanks him for his training and promises to try, even though it will take time, and the Emperor, after a pause, suddenly strokes her head. No matter how large the Actylos Empire is, rumors spread at the speed of light. Nothing had been officially announced yet, and the aristocrats were already whispering about the hunting festival. They also talked about how the emperor took care of Angelica after losing consciousness, and then, after waiting for 2 hours on the parade ground, personally trained her. These rumors are spread, of course, by the ladies-in-waiting, but this even plays into the hands of the empress, because in this way they confirm her positions. Although, on the other hand, for a person who is planning an escape, it is burdensome for high society to focus on her person. But now there is definitely a need to demonstrate good relations with the emperor, because someone else like Jaxiu may appear. To show the empress their affection, she is constantly sent gifts from different parts of the empire, and even from abroad. Angelica learns that the construction of the hunting ground will be completed in 4 days, and she will soon be able to inspect it. She knows that no matter how hard she tries, it will be difficult for her to win in a fight with her mother and son Jackie. Therefore, Angelica wants to gather more information that will give her an advantage in this battle. As he continues his training, Raniero gradually begins to feel distrustful of the human brain. Doubting her sword-fighting abilities, Angelica suggests that she needs to train in running. After a short silence, the emperor decides to take the girl to inspect the hunting ground. Seeing the prepared territory, Angelica is once again convinced of the scale with which Raniero is used to doing everything. If you are on the tower, you can get good vision and benefit from using the bow. The emperor wants the girl to know that he has done much for her comfort, and she is grateful to him for this. After that, Angelica met with Raniero every morning and practiced shooting. After classes, she was preparing for the summer solstice until late at night. Although she was worried that she had never seen Sylvia since that day, the empress had no time to be distracted by other matters. One morning, Raniero brings Angelica a dress. He wants her to wear it to the holiday ball if she doesn't die hunting. And finally, the long-awaited event of the solstice comes. The hunt is scheduled in the afternoon. Angelica comes to the imperial throne and asks Raniero if she is too late. With a laugh, he tells the girl that he has been waiting for her for 2 hours, and then grabs her by the hand and puts her on his lap. Sitting like sweet spouses, they discuss the plan according to which Angelica plans to move on the hunting ground. The beginning of the celebration is announced, and Raniero, holding the girl's hand, greets the audience. A festive dinner begins, but Angelica cannot swallow a bite due to strong excitement. Raniero pushes a glass to the girl, the contents of which are different from what is poured in his glass, and offers a drink. He whispers in her ear to drink it all down, and Angelica obediently empties the glass. She is frightened, not understanding what was in the drink, as her hands and feet immediately became hot. Raniero asks the girl to try to endure, and soon everything will be different for her. She suddenly begins to laugh and, noticing the surprised looks of the guests, asks everyone to enjoy dinner. Angelica suddenly has a strong appetite. She eats, and the taste of food seems richer to her than usual. After this drink, everything became strange. The girl's body became light and hot, then heavy, and instead of being nervous, she was now looking forward to hunting. During the preparations, she receives a gift from Raniero, a purified deadly poison extracted from a poisonous frog soleo. The emperor asked me to tell the girl that she knew what to do with him. The empress comes out, the guests greet her admiringly, and Angelica regrets that they won't be able to watch from behind the fence. Looking around the hunting field where the prey is hiding, the girl suddenly notices Sylvia next to her. She is trembling with emotion, endlessly repeating to herself that everything will be fine. The pity that Angelica felt a few weeks ago, looking at Sylvia on her knees, now seems to her a deception. If the girl fulfills the task well, she will be entitled to a reward, but if she does not cope, it will no longer matter. The emperor joins them, reiterating that Angelica will not die, and he again ignores the question of what was poured into her glass. The beginning of the hunt is announced, and the empress feels an impatient desire to enter the field as soon as possible. Having previously lubricated the arrows with the poison given by Raniero, Angelica takes a place on the observation head and focuses on the sounds. A crunch is suddenly heard from below, but as she takes aim, the empress notices that it is Sylvia. The girl wants to say something to Angelica, but at that moment, the Marquise Jacques comes up to her from behind and grabs her daughter by the hair. With a malicious glint in her eyes, she anticipates how her heart will be cut out of her chest to present to the emperor. The woman hopes that in this way she will receive Raniero's mercy, and Angelica, meanwhile, aims at her from the tower. The Empress shoots but misses, and noticing where the arrow came from, the Marquise looks at the girl with hatred. Taking advantage of her mother's distraction, Sylvia throws herself at her and knocks her to the ground. Grabbing a stone from the ground and holding the Marquise, the girl, as if mad with the desire to live, strikes her on the head one after another. Descending from the tower, Angelica regrets that Raniero did not see this painting. Falling to her knees before the Empress, Sylvia offers to appropriate this booty for herself. Angelica tells the girl that she is proud of her and, taking a dagger from the scabbard, cuts the throat of the Marquise. At that moment, Henry Jaxieu appears from behind the trees, stunned by the death of his mother. The Empress aims at the Marquis, trembling with anger. The arrow flies past but touches his shoulder. Suddenly, Angelica feels severe pain in her muscles. It seems to her that they are about to tear, and she falls. Henry is already swinging an axe at the girl, but then Raniero appears behind him, who stabs him with a sword. Approaching Angelica, he smiles, telling her about the remedy she drank. It makes you overcome the limit of physical capabilities, increases mental elation, and removes fear. However, the remedy overloads the body too much, and its effect ends unexpectedly, so it cannot be used for military purposes. Raniero pours painkillers into his mouth and kisses Angelica, passing the medicine to her with his lips. The pain releases, and the Emperor shows the girl the prey she caught. Smiling, he announces today's reception in honor of the newly born Empress. Stepping out onto the balcony of the castle, Raniero announces to the audience that Angelica has caught the prey on her own. The people fall to their knees in front of the imperial couple, and the girl is once again convinced that the inhabitants of this country worship power. The festive evening begins, and entering the hall, Angelica sits down in her seat next to Raniero. Since the first dance at the ball is to be performed by the Emperor, he and Angelica get up to dance. Suddenly, the girl feels that she is losing her balance and falling, but she does not grasp Raniero's outstretched hand. Having fallen, Angelica hurts herself, and the Emperor smiles that she was not mistaken even now. After all, if she grabbed the outstretched hand, she would touch his body without permission, and this is unacceptable. Suddenly, to Angelica's surprise, Raniero bends down and, taking him in his arms, puts him back on the throne. Sylvia appears in the hall, greeting the imperial couple, and the guests begin to whisper that the girl has no shame. One of the aristocrats demands that the Marquise's daughter be expelled from the imperial hall. However, Angelica notes that this girl, in order to prove her loyalty, sacrificed her own mother. The Empress suggests that Sylvia may be even more loyal than he himself is the Emperor's assistant. Hearing her haughty speech, Raniero begins to laugh. He finds her manner interesting and amusing. Following the Emperor, all those gathered begin to laugh, and Angelica feels how they all laugh through force, like dolls. Turning to the Emperor, Sylvia asks him for the reward promised to her. As promised, Raniero appoints the girl as a lady-in-waiting of the Empress's palace, for which she thanks him. In fact, it was possible to get an appointment as a maid after the ball, but Sylvia did it ostentatiously in front of the aristocrats. Having received it right here personally from Raniero, she showed that she was now the Empress's man, and no one could neglect her. Tired after a long conversation with people in the hall, Angelica goes out into the courtyard and sits down by the fountain. The girl jumps up from her seat, noticing that the Emperor is approaching her. Holding the flower in his hand, he notes that, contrary to expectations, she looks as if nothing happened and she killed a person. Saying that a weak person would tremble now after killing another, he adorns her hair with a flower. So it is, even if it was for the sake of protection. But now Angelica is a murderer, but she understands that guilt will not change anything. The girl thanks Raniero for showing up in time and killing Henry, because otherwise she would be dead now. The Emperor gave Angelica a drug to create an entertaining spectacle with her behavior. Although Raniero knew about the side effects, he did not feel guilty, because everything went according to plan, one after another. But he could not imagine how the Empress would perceive everything, whether she would feel guilty or run away, seized by fear. However, Angelica, who, as he thought, would not be able to attend the banquet, appeared as if nothing had happened in the dress given to Raniero. And at that moment he felt a slight trepidation, because it was as if he saw what her face looked like for the first time. The Emperor finds all this strange. He smiles affectionately, stretches out his hand to Angelica, and invites her to return. Entering the palace, the girl is surprised as Raniero leads her to her half of the castle. They enter a spacious room, a secret chamber belonging only to the emperor, where even servants are forbidden to enter. Raniero takes off his shirt and, approaching the surprised Angelica, kisses her. Then he goes down into the hot pool, located right there, in the room, and calls the girl to him. Putting her feet in the water, Angelica thinks about why the emperor shows her this place that no one knows about. Tired of her timidity, Raniero grabs the girl by the leg and pulls her into the water. Confused, she does not know how to behave, and when the emperor, affectionately calling her Angie, allows him to touch him, she hugs him. Raniero carries Angelica to the bed, and they spend the night together. The girl falls asleep, and the emperor thinks that she has become even more impudent because he did not give her permission to sleep. Now the empress is a man of Actelos, who has received universal recognition, and from tomorrow everyone will treat her differently. After all, the fact that after training for only a month, she defeated the martial arts experienced citizens of Actelos meant that she had great potential. Suddenly, in a dream, Angelica begins to moan. It seems that she is about to suffocate. Raising her head, Raniero gives the girl artificial respiration and then kisses her, but she bites his lip through her sleep. The empress opens her eyes with tears. She dreamed that the prey with a severed head was chasing her with an axe. The girl is scared. She trembles all over her body and snuggles up to Raniero, who hugs her to comfort her. In the morning, Angelica sleeps so soundly that the emperor needed to repeat her name several times to wake her up. He is angered by the girl's disobedience and orders her to wash her face and prepare for an apology. Angelica is uncomfortable having breakfast in the main palace, especially under the frowning and heavy gaze of the emperor. The girl asks him for permission to let her go home after breakfast, but Raniero notes with a smile that this is her home. She explains her slip of the tongue by lack of sleep, but it seems to the emperor that Angelica slept very well. In addition, the girl needs to return to her part of the castle, since today Sylvia should arrive at the empress's palace. Angelica notices a wound on Raniero's lip and, having learned from him that she did it, cannot believe it, because if she had harmed the emperor, she would have already been dead. Agreeing with this, he notices the severity of her crime, for which the girl must be punished accordingly. As the empress wants to return to her domain, Raniero decides not to let her go there as punishment. In the morning, the emperor usually sorts out letters, holds meetings in the afternoon, and in the evening he does physical exercises. Standing next to him at the desk, Angelica thinks about whether she will be able to leave during his state meetings. Noticing that she has been standing all this time, Raniero orders a servant to bring a chair so that the empress can sit next to him. Opening another envelope, the emperor finds a letter from the Temple of Thunia in it. The Thunia Temple is an abandoned sanctuary in the barren land of the northwest. The letter speaks of only believers in the God of mercy who remained there, who ceded all the fertile land to the world, and only crude things to their descendants. Currently, there is some tension between Actelos and the Kingdom of Sombinia. Raniero is bored, reading monotonous letters asking for help. Turning to Angelica, he notices that she has fallen asleep again, and, coming close to her, begins to shake her by the shoulders to wake her up. Waking up, the girl admits that she is embarrassed to sit idle and asks to be allowed to at least read the letters that he has already looked through. Of course, the empress has the right to know how things are going with state policy, but Raniero seems that it is too early for this. Ignoring her question, he turns away and continues to work silently, and Angelica wonders what he might be angry about. The emperor notices her fright and confusion, and this amuses him so much that he decides to play along with this role. As a result, Raniero dragged Angelica with him all day long, for lunch and to meetings and even to night training. Only after all this was the empress able to free herself and return to her home, where she was surrounded by the care of a servant. She had planned to throw a party for Sylvia to become a lady-in-waiting, but because of Raniero, she hadn't been able to do so today. The Duchess of Nurma tells Angelica how much she was impressed by yesterday's hunt. According to her, now Her Majesty has become the mother of the state, whom everyone sincerely loves and looks forward to meeting her. Now it's time for Angelica to return to the postponed banquet, and Nurma admits that she started a rumor in social circles. She announced the need to demonstrate in advance her sincerity towards the empress. Although, according to Nirma, not everyone will have the opportunity to meet with the ruler at the beginning of next month. After studying the palace's routines, Angelica will be ready to make her debut and then manage all the affairs of the imperial family, and the maid is willing to help her in any way she can. The girl has just managed to finish things with the solstice, and now she will have to deal with new ones. She does not know how and when, with all this busyness, she will finally be able to deal with the escape plan. There were 15 days left before the banquet, and all this time Angelica was studying with Duchess Nirma, not even noticing how quickly time flew by. The girl studied the names of aristocrats in the capital, family relations, details about the business of their enterprises. Catching her studying, Raniero takes the book from Angelica's hands, ironically noting what an interesting reading she is engaged in. Plopping down on her bed, he declares that the Empress is being forced to do something unnecessary and throws the book aside. The Emperor explains that, in her position, it is enough for a girl to raise her chin and speak, smiling arrogantly. She is not obliged to know and be anxious to know the names of those who address her, but she will condescend to listen to them. Raniero advises Angelica to just dominate because she is the wife of the Emperor. He sees no reason why she can't use his method and act in his style. Raniero advises Angelica to start by learning how to keep her facial expressions if she can't follow his advice. A week later, on the day of the banquet, Saizen tells Nirma that the event must be postponed. Her Majesty's menstrual cycle is irregular, and she has severe pain, especially on the first day. The ladies-in-waiting begin to argue about the expediency of holding the event, but Angelica interrupts their argument. She decides not to tolerate the banquet and asks to bring her painkillers. Pulling herself together despite the intense pain, the Empress prepares to go out to the aristocrats. As she stands before the waiting guests, she thanks them for their visit and hopes that they will be proud of the opportunity and always reflect on what they can do for the empire. Today, the banquet is attended by noble ladies and ladies who were chosen by the Duchess of Nirma, a woman with great ambitions. Suddenly, Angelica realizes with horror that she is confused about the names and genealogies of these people. She thinks about what Raniero would do in such a case and remembers his advice. The guests freeze when they hear the Empress declare that she does not know at all who they are and what they are doing. Choosing one woman from the crowd, Angelica arrogantly asks her to stand up and try to tell about herself briefly and clearly. The Empress feels sorry for Duchess Nirma, but she cannot tarnish her image by showing weakness. One by one, the invitees begin to tell her about themselves and, smiling, she expresses her joy at getting to know them. It is obvious that Nirma is upset that the secular meeting did not go according to plan. Angelica asks her why. Instead of worrying about the health of the Empress, the lady-in-waiting looks at her with reproach. The Duchess apologizes, claiming that she had no such intention. Nirma is a very smart woman, and therefore the Empress needs to set boundaries so that she cannot be familiar. Suddenly, the guests greet the Emperor who has entered, who greatly surprised Angelica with his appearance. Turning to those present and picking up the girl in his arms, he announces his intention to steal her from this event. Raniero thinks that his wife will enjoy his company more than a boring pastime with these people. His act demonstrated absolute disrespect for the confused guests and maids of honor, on whose shoulders fell the obligation to complete the reception. This is surprising and confusing because for the first time Angelica is happy with her husband. Meeting Sylvia on the way, Raniero tells her about the Empress's poor health and refuses the girl's offer to take her to the room, preferring to carry her himself. Angelica feels that the Emperor is becoming more lenient towards her every day. Sylvia leaves the room to bring painkillers, and Raniero, pulling a chair to the bed, sits down next to him. He believes that Angelica must have a very high opinion of herself, since she thought of appearing in such a state in front of people. She apologizes, and Raniero remarks that she is lucky to have only fools there. Angelica jumps up, remembering that now is the time for a meeting on state affairs. As it turned out, Raniero missed the meeting, considering it not worth a long discussion. After asking what the topic was today, Angelica learns that the meeting was about the Temple of Tunia, a barren land with little influence, whose mountain range did not attract the attention of Actylos. The novel said that Tunia regularly asked for a softening of the relationship between the two powers, Actylos and Sombinia. According to Raniero, in those parts it was time for demon beasts to hatch from eggs, and it was time to exterminate them. It seems contradictory to the emperor that they are asking for mercy for brutal destruction. Angelica hopes that Raniero will still go on this hike because he likes blood splatters, but he has not yet made a decision. The emperor invites the girl to personally bow her head at his feet, and then he may show mercy. Angelica thinks what will happen if messengers are sent from the temple, including Serafina. She tries to get these thoughts out of her head, because if everything goes according to the original, the goddess will not arrive, and her meeting with Raniero will take place in winter. But what if the time of Serafina's appearance has changed in the same way that Angelica and Raniero have become closer, unlike the original? Although a long time passed, the social event did not happen again, as all the attention of the Empress was focused on the Temple of Tunya. Although Angelica understands that Seraphine will not come, she does not stop worrying and is looking for more information about the temple. After all, if these two meet earlier and the action of the novel is moved to an earlier date, the girl will lose her life before the onset of winter. Suddenly, Angelica finds information about Saint Tunya, the most precious creature in religious society. It says that the saint does not leave the mountain range of the temple and does not contact the outside world. However, this is all Angelica managed to find, although she vaguely imagined that Tunya would be influential to some extent. However, there are many more stories about demonic animals in the books. As it turned out, the inhabitants of the Tunya mountain range catch them and eat them when there is an acute shortage of food. When the breeding season begins on the lands of these animals, the grown animals plunder human lands due to lack of food. If Raniero goes to conquer the beasts, he will meet Seraphine as he passes through the mountain range. Therefore, Angelica decides that she too needs to go with the emperor to this extermination. And if it turns out that it is at this time that Raniero meets the goddess, she will immediately run away from there. The day of the arrival of the delegation from the church arrives, and Angelica is very worried. Raniero, who meets her in the corridor, asks why the Empress missed breakfast. The girl, who was afraid of indigestion due to nerves, confesses to him that she is not feeling well. In response, Raniero advises her not to meet with the messengers. In an impulse, Angelica grabs the emperor by the sleeve and, apologizing for this, asks to be allowed to give them an audience. Raniero agrees, and they go to the hall where a meeting with the delegation is scheduled. Angelica is surprised that the archbishop himself has arrived for an audience from Tunya. In addition to him, among the envoys in front of the imperial couple is the Holy Knight of the Temple, Eden, Seraphina's first love. The Order of the Holy Knights of the Ridge absorbs the strongest warriors who resist demonic beasts. Although Eden is not a very important character, he is a rising star who rose to the top thanks to his innate martial arts skills. In the original, because of Seraphina, who constantly pines for Eden, he was killed by Raniero. The emperor is interested in whether those who ask him for help have brought a worthy tribute for him. Before the bishop has time to answer, Raniero interrupts him and says that he will be merciful and will not accept the tribute brought. Instead, he orders them to fall to their knees and beg to be saved. If the envoys did not obey the emperor at once, they would have to return, and the power of the temple alone would not be able to cope with it. The bishop still hesitates, but Eden steps forward and kneels before Raniero, followed by the others. The emperor begins to laugh, and Angelica thinks what a bastard he is. After the end of the meeting, the girl finds it strange that Eden knelt. After all, in the original, he is described as a straightforward knight with a rebellious temperament who does not adapt to what he thinks is wrong. Angelica overhears the maids admiring Eden's training, which impresses them even more than the emperor. Since the envoys of the temple stayed in Actelos for 9 days, the empress decides to give the guests due attention. On the way, she meets Raniero, who is bored with the bishop and has come to hug the girl. Angelica tells him about her plans to give orders about the upcoming dinner. However, the emperor had already decided everything himself, and therefore she did not need to bother so she could return to the palace. Raniero walks along with Angelica, wondering why she's been so interested in the temple lately. Having given up the study of high society, which she had studied so diligently, she searched the library for information about Tunya. She even said that she wanted to give an audience to the delegation, despite feeling unwell. After all, the Empress's homeland, the Onro Kingdom, and the backbone of the temple are far away, and they have no reason to conduct foreign trade. Angelica asks Raniero who he decided to sit at the table during dinner, and he asks how she was going to organize it. In her opinion, the archbishop, the commander of the Order of the Knights, and 2 elderly priests should sit down according to rank. However, the emperor does not find such seating of guests interesting. In fact, Angelica does not quite understand who is important besides them, because she sees everyone for the first time. If it had been 2 months ago, such an answer would have bored Raniero, but now it seems to him that the girl wants to sit opposite that night during dinner. Sitting down on the bed, he calls Angelica to him, rejoicing at her docility, but he would like her to be the first to caress him. After that day, the Empress instructed Saisen to keep an eye on Eden, and now the lady-in-waiting informs her of what she has learned. As it turned out, Eden took a book from the library, hid it under his clothes, and went to a place where no one was. Deciding to check everything herself, Angelica asks Saisen to arrange it so that she does not have to attend the training. On the appointed day, the Empress sends Nirma to watch the training with everyone else. The Duchess refuses because the mistress does not feel well, and she cannot leave her alone. Angelica convinces her that the presence of Shizen alone is enough for her and strongly advises her to go have fun. She asks the maids to go there to tell her who won, and Nirma finally agrees. The Empress asks Saisen if there is anyone in the library now, and when she receives an answer, she calms the worried lady-in-waiting. She walks out towards the library and watches from behind the bushes the road that Eden must take if he goes to get a book again. Angelica was not mistaken in her assumptions, because very soon a knight appeared who passed by without noticing her. Jumping out of her hiding place, she stops Eden and tells him that he won't be able to find the materials he's looking for, whatever they are. He explains that he is not looking for anything specific, just going to look around as he really likes books. Angelica asks for her name, but he claims that he has no other name than Eden. The girl, afraid that she was wrong in her assumptions, insists that if he does not answer, then she better leave here. Looking at her intently, the guy suddenly admits that his real name is Chester. Convinced of the correctness of her guesses, Angelica asks him about the book, which they both apparently ended up in. As it turned out, both of them moved into the novel on the same day, the 18th of May. The girl who thought that this happened to her alone suddenly begins to cry and admits that she ordered the maid to watch him. The guy is happy to meet her because he also could not think that someone was in the same position as him. Now he understood how Angelica understood all this, because his actions are very different from the novel she was reading. Since they don't have much time to talk, Eden immediately asks Eden about a book he was reading in the library. According to him, this is a book about forbidden magic, as it seems to him that this is the reason he came to this world. Angelica has read many novels of this genre, where movement was the basis of the works. So she didn't even think about it that way, and she didn't wonder why or how she ended up here. Judging by the girl's words, Eden concludes that the Emperor is not one of them who moved. If so, she would be happy, because Raniero is just as crazy as in the original, and she has to walk like a blade every day. Eden does not understand why there are 2 of them with Angelica, and both of them are supporting characters who died in the original. The guy plans to remove the magic and return back to where he lived before. However, Angelica knows that most of the characters in such travel novels do not return to their original world. Raniero boredly watches the friendly battle in training, periodically glancing at Angelica's empty throne. Tired of boredom, he gets up and heads to the Empress's palace, where he is met by Shizen, who is confused by his appearance. Entering Angelica's room, Raniero walks over to the bed and, brushing off the blanket, finds that she is not in bed. With a malicious glint in his eyes, he orders the servant, who wanted to stand up for the mistress, to shut up. Raniero noticed that one knight was not at the training, and Angelica also visited it under the pretext of illness. The girl asks Chester if he has seen Seraphine if he lives in the Temple of Tunia. However, the guy admits that he does not really know her because he avoids meeting her in every possible way. Angelica is surprised by this confession because the memories of the heroes are passed on to them over time, and Eden must know Seraphine. Chester admits that, in fact, the feelings of the owner of his body are so strong that he is influenced by them. However, despite having only a distorted image, he still suggests that Eden actually hates Seraphine. Angelica is shocked, as she has always assumed that there are mutual feelings between the knight and the goddess. Chester explains that Eden always had norm and morality in the foreground, and he believed that it was unacceptable for a saint to have feelings for a holy knight. The guy plans to go on a mission to destroy demonic beasts, as he wants to look at the great library of an abandoned temple. Since it was not possible to find clues by conventional methods, he is going to take the risk because she is located on the border of animals and people. Angelica, in turn, promises to find the necessary information in the Imperial Library. She promises to find the guy in Tunia if she finds anything, and he is surprised that she is also planning to go to the suppression. In order to avoid problems, they decide to end the conversation, because it is better for Angelica to return before the end of the friendly sparring. Glad that she managed to return alive and unharmed, the girl enters the palace. However, she suddenly freezes, because in the middle of the room, sitting in an armchair, Raniero is waiting for her. The Emperor, with a wicked grin, wonders why she took a walk if she felt bad. Angelica explains that she went out to get some air, because she had a severe headache. Noticing that her hands are shaking, and this did not pass by Raniero's gaze, she says that she is afraid of his menacing gaze. The Emperor wonders if she has met that night, and Angelica, denying this, asks if he suspects her of something. Raniero wonders if he is becoming vulnerable, nervous that these two decided not to show up for training today. Even if his wife likes this man, he has nothing to be angry about, because the Emperor cannot be jealous of an aunt like her. Angelica begins to cry, admitting that she cannot lie to the Emperor. Kneeling down to her, Raniero hugs the girl, much to her surprise. However, she seems so weak to him, and knowing that showing his anger will scare her again, the Emperor says that he is not angry. This was the first time that Raniero managed to completely fool Angelica. In a relationship where both parties do not know each other well, a small turning point began to occur. When the Emperor left, Angelica finally gave vent to her feelings, because she was very frightened, thinking that she was finished. She can't believe he's so angry about her absence because she's nothing more than a pitiless prey to him. Apparently, there must be another reason for this, but for now she decides not to disappear from Raniero's sight for a while. The Emperor stands with his wife, talking to the knights, and Eden and Angelica pretend that they do not know each other. The girl is already impatient to stop this conversation, and she asks Raniero to leave, and he suddenly gently hugs her. When the Emperor asks how everyone slept, the knight replies that they all spent a comfortable and serene night. Continuing to stroke Angelica's hair, Raniero wonders if the knights like food. Eden is surprised by the Emperor's tenderness, as the girl told him that he is as crazy as the original. Angelica is also surprised and frightened by the behavior of Raniero, who suddenly decided to kiss the Empress in front of everyone. Kissing her, he watches Eden from under his brow, who is uncomfortable with his gaze. The girl asks to stop because it is time for the knights to go, and Raniero agrees, informing everyone that she obviously can't wait to be alone with him. Now Angelica has no doubt that the Emperor suspects her of something because he was looking at Eden so intently. Through Saizen, she gives the knight a letter asking what they should do, as the Emperor may have guessed their conversation. After receiving a response from Chester in which he says that he doesn't think so, Angelica is angry because the guy is not so smart. Watching her mistress, Saizen thinks about how she has changed since she lived in the Onro Kingdom. When it was decided to send her to the Actylos Empire for marriage, Saizen felt sorry for the princess who cried endlessly. The maid decided to live in a foreign land, refusing to marry, but Angelica, who has become empress, seems to her a different person. Saizen decides to tell the hostess about his concern, but before she can say a word, Angelica interrupts her. She realizes that the lady-in-waiting thinks that she has some feelings for the knight from the Temple of Tunia. She is sorry for making Saizen doubt herself, but she assures her that things are not as they seem. With tears in her eyes, the girl asks why in this case Angelica does not tell her anything, because this has never happened before. Seeing her tears, the Empress reveals that she has nothing for the knight, and her interest is directed to the saint from the Temple of Tunia. However, Saizen does not understand why Angelica decided to find out about the saint from Eden, since she could have talked to the Archbishop. The Empress replies that she did so because it seems to her that Eden has no friends at all. In addition, she thought that a person who did not feel belonging to the temple would tell more than the Archbishop. Hearing Angelica's explanation, Saizen rejoices and, wiping away her tears, apologizes to her for misunderstanding her at first. The Empress claims that she has no intention of betraying her husband, and these words are heard by Raniero standing outside the door. He smiles because, knowing that Angelica is very close to her servant, he has no doubt that what she has just said is true. Sizin is happy with the harmony between the spouses because until recently the hostess cried, not wanting to get married, and now she has adapted so well and become a respected empress. Angelica admits that it is hard, but it seems to her that His Majesty treats her quite well. Hearing this, Raniero smiles again, and Sizin expresses the hope that in time the Empress will love this country even more. Angelica also hopes so, unless, of course, she dies in winter hunting. The Emperor laughs that the girl is worried about winter hunting because he himself has completely forgotten about her. Remembering that Angelica is interested in the saint from the temple, he thinks that it would be nice to meet her when he goes on an expedition. In the evening, lying on the Empress's lap, Raniero notices her good mood. The girl notes that the reason for this is the complacency of the Emperor, which pleases her. Both of them laugh at the comedy of Angelica, who finds such fun strange. Raniero puts the girl's hand on his head, and she, obeying this movement, begins to stroke him. The Emperor asks Angelica what else she likes, and she does not understand since when he has been interested in her preferences. The Empress decides to ask Raniero to allow her to join him on an expedition to exterminate demonic beasts. She understands that her request could seem strange to him because she is so fearful and asks to go into the thick of bloody actions. However, unexpectedly, Raniero, smiling, agrees to her request since she wants to follow him. Angelica is dumbfounded. She is the first to see such an expression on the Emperor's face. After all, he is always depicted as the devil, and his essence has hitherto seemed demonic to him. But now his face is so harmless and radiant that she reaches out and touches his cheek affectionately. Angelica understands that she cannot be deceived because this man can become dangerous at any moment, but he hugs her tightly. She realizes that he's not permanent, and tomorrow he'll be the Raniero she knows, but right now she's hugging him too. However, tomorrow came, and contrary to Angelica's expectations, the Emperor did not return to his former appearance. The Archbishop thanks His Majesty for the reception he received, during which the members of the delegation had a good rest. After seeing off the envoys, the Emperor smiles again and hugs Angelica. The girl is amazed because at some point the formidable Raniero Actilos began to behave like the hero of a love story. If you think objectively, it's good that he has become friendly, but Angelica can't take it seriously. Back in the spring when they got married, he hated even touching, and now he constantly asks what she likes. Lying in bed, she wonders if she can escape before Raniero's interest in her fades. Meanwhile, as he sips his wine, the Emperor thinks about why she doesn't speak directly about her preferences. A few days ago, after overhearing Angelica's conversation with the maid, he had a passionate desire. He can count the moments when she smiles on his fingers, and he wants to see her smiling broadly. He realized that he wanted to own this woman and he wanted her to love him. Angelica is sitting in the library and, noticing the falling leaves outside the window, remembers that in a week she will go on an expedition. In all this time, she had looked through almost all the books related to magic, but there was nothing about people who came from another world. Apparently, as Eden had said, there was no choice but to go to the large abandoned book depository of the sanctuary. Raniero enters the library and, sitting next to Angelica, asks if there is anything she would like to see on the expedition. When she replies that she is looking for nothing specific, the Emperor asks about the saint who does not leave the Temple of Tunia. The girl shudders. She does not understand why Raniero is so interested in this, whether he really wants to see Serafina. The Emperor is surprised by her reaction. It seemed to him that Angelica would like it if he talked about the topic that interested her. Smiling, he asks what if he wants to see the saint, but the girl suddenly begins to dissuade him. He does not understand why he is so dissuaded from doing so, and Angelica explains that Seraphine is very beautiful, and this can be a problem for her. When asked how she dares to monopolize him, the girl is frightened and tries to get out of it, explaining that he misunderstood her. However, suddenly Raniero smiles. He likes Angelica's possessive attitude towards him. 10 days later, an expedition to exterminate the demon beasts began. Raniero rides on horseback, but Angelica, despite the fact that she knows how to ride, is put in a carriage. The Empress took only Sizin and Sylvia with her as companions, because the smallest number of servants is better to implement an escape in case of an emergency. People say that Angelica took Sylvia as a trophy, and so while her rating was rising, the girl's reputation fell. Even if the empress behaved, the lady-in-waiting would not be able to tell anyone because no one would listen to the words of a weak girl. After 3 days of uninterrupted travel, the carriage doors swing open and Raniero orders Angelica to get out. The camp has not yet been set up, so she does not understand why he called her. Taking the girl by the hand, he asks if she likes something beautiful and, having received a positive answer, leads her somewhere. Deep into the forest, Raniero wonders if it is true that people like her think something sparkling is beautiful. Angelica freezes from unimaginable beauty. The earth, illuminated by night stars, is covered with many shining flowers. She can't believe how the emperor was able to find such an amazing place, and he asks her to smile if she likes it. The girl thinks she is in a dream. She approaches Raniero and, standing on tiptoe, hugs him. He kisses her affectionately and gently repeats her name aloud several times. Raniero knocks Angelica to the ground, and the girl realizes that if he brought her here to smile, then her feelings are important to him. Finally reaching Tunya, the emperor is met by the bishop, whom he orders to prepare beds for everyone. Raniero will take care of food and clothing for his people himself, and they are asked to take care of a place to live for him and his wife. Driving along the mountain range of the Thunya temple, the surrounding villages seem abandoned to Angelica. After all, such a large column of arrivals passes along the street, and none of the residents comes out to look at it. The empress suddenly realizes in a new way that people see Actelos as an object of fear. Raniero has a meeting scheduled with the commander of the Order of the Holy Knights and asks if Angelica will join him. The girl refuses, and the emperor, not hiding his regret, pats her on the head as a farewell. Raniero has definitely changed, and Angelica has no choice but to accept the fact that this man likes her very much. However, who knows, maybe when he meets Seraphine, everything will change, so she needs to be careful. Angelica told Sison to take a wad of money with her, but she didn't want to run away right now. At that moment, Eden comes up from behind and grabs the girl, and covering her mouth, shows her not to scream in fright. Letting her go, he apologizes for scaring her, and Angelica asks him where Seraphine is and if he can meet her. However, Eden took measures to make this impossible, because if the events of the original begin earlier, it could also be a problem for him. He suggested that the archbishop send Seraphina on a journey, because the visit of the saint could be of help to those who were worried about the extermination. Angelica, delighted with his ingenuity, in turn spoke of her failure in the search for the necessary literature. After all, the existence of this world was not described in any book, and there were not even stories about souls transmigrating into another body. And although Eden believes that they can only visit the abandoned library, Angelica decides not to show her skepticism about it. She says that she will go with the emperor to exterminate, because His Majesty wants it. Angelica admits to Eden that she thinks Raniero likes her, but Eden is not surprised because he knew it. However, the girl is worried about this, because this twist is clearly different from the original. Eden asks her if she will stay here if even after meeting Seraphina, Raniero does not feel any interest in her. Angelica is silent and only wants to say something as Eden interrupts her, believing that such an answer is enough for him. The girl is ashamed to show such an image in front of him because she is very excited by the thought that Raniero likes. Grabbing her hand, Eden says that he will understand if she wants to stay, as the situation here may be better for her than there. Angelica promises to help the guy return, even if she herself decides to stay here. Eden smiles and says that it is better for them to part ways and not see each other again. Sitting at dinner, Angelica ponders whether the changed Raniero will continue to cherish her, or if he will be fascinated by seeing Seraphine. She does not know whether she herself can be sure that, even after overcoming obstacles, she will not be disappointed in him. Seeing the narrow bed made for her alone, Angelica catches herself thinking that she regrets it. Would she really want to stay here? Because if she was honest with herself, she hadn't been so happy in that life. She was so poor that inexpensive books were her only hobby, and she had no friends. While Angelica was a princess, educated and raised in love, she also has a devoted girlfriend, Sison. But since there is no guarantee that Raniero will always love her, from a rational point of view, it would be better for her to leave. The emperor appears on the doorstep, bringing food for Angelica as she missed dinner. He sat down next to her and began to feed the girl, and she noticed that Raniero had brought exactly what she liked most from food. Angelica wishes him good luck tomorrow, and she thinks that she will not be able to fully let him into her heart until the fear of him disappears. When the girl has finished eating, Raniero notices how narrow the bed is here because even one person can hardly fit on it. He moves closer to Angelica and begins to kiss her, but she, feeling that her heart is about to break, suddenly pushes him away. Raniero looks at the girl in surprise, and she is struck by the expression on his face. She could not believe that she had rejected the touch of a man who, perhaps, had not been rejected by anyone since birth. Realizing that she needs to fix everything quickly before he gets angry, Angelica pretends to be just joking. She apologizes for her mistake and asks him not to get angry. However, Raniero calmly tells her that he is not angry. He tenderly hugs the girl to him and asks her not to be afraid and not to cry. Her heart is beating wildly. She can't believe that Raniero isn't angry. He puts the girl on his lap and, since the journey was difficult, advises her to rest and sleep. Angelica is approached by a girl whose face is hidden under a veil and hands her a tray. Opening it, the Empress sees someone's head on the tray and, thinking that it is Jaxiu's head, throws it away in fright. The head rolls away. It turns out to be Eden, who asks Angelica if she stays here. Stepping back, she realizes that the girl with the veil is Seraphine, silently and coldly looking into her eyes. Running away from her, she falls into the arms of Raniero, who is right there, who calls her his winter prey. Seraphina seems to be trying to say something to Angelica, but she does not understand her words. She hears that she is being called, and opening her eyes, sees an agitated emperor in front of her, who asks her to come to her senses. Angelica realizes that she has had a nightmare, and it seems strange to her that in a dream she seemed to want to go towards death. Looking in the mirror in the morning, she understands why Raniero gripped her wrists tightly. After all, if he hadn't stopped her, the mark on her neck could have been even more monstrous. Today is the day they will go to the sanctuary, so Angelica decides to prepare and forget about that dream. Going out into the courtyard, the girl talks to the bishop, and at that moment Raniero comes out to them, asking if she can go with them. As it turned out, the expedition will take the squad 2 weeks, although the sanctuary is close, because the squad must destroy the animals. Come to think of it, by staying here, Angelica might have so much time to explore the cathedral without Raniero's supervision. Therefore, explaining that she can interfere with the hike with her slow pace, she announces her decision to stay. Taking Raniero's hands, she says that she wants to finish everything here as soon as possible and return with him to their home, to the palace. He turns away from her, withdrawing his hands, and promises to return as soon as possible. Angelica asks the archbishop for permission to inspect the sanctuary she has read so much about when it is reconquered. The knights set off, and Eden notices the emperor's frown. He is surprised that Raniero's feelings were hurt that the empress did not go with them to extermination. Eden can't believe that Angelica has tamed the emperor so much that she can go against his will. Now he is like a different person, completely different from the one described in the book. At that moment, the knights are attacked by demonic beasts, and they witness Raniero destroy an entire pack in an instant. One of the beasts turns out to be alive, but the emperor draws his sword again and kills it in one movement. The more Angelica moves away, the more something inside Raniero wakes up. The party reaches the shrine and discovers the eggs of demonic beasts around it. With a malevolent smile, Raniero asks the knights if they have ever witnessed the appearance of demonic beasts. He orders to kill the hatchlings, to catch the mothers alive and not to touch the eggs. The emperor seems crazy to Eden, because in this hellish carnage, in addition to killing animals, he also has fun taking eggs. When the knight asks why they don't destroy the eggs now, Raniero replies that it's not interesting. One of the warriors informs the emperor that one of the cubs has hatched, but he did not kill it. The cub did not attack, as he probably mistook the knight for his mother, and this amuses Raniero a lot. He orders the eggs to be collected and watched, and Eden wonders who the demon beast really is. Eden, who is in line for duty, after examining the eggs and deciding that they will not hatch yet, decides to inspect the surroundings for now. Entering the book depository, he is disappointed because it turns out to be much smaller than he expected. However, in the wall, Eden sees a small stone door that is slightly ajar, behind which another, very narrow passage is revealed. He realizes that he will not be able to get into the passage, and at that moment he notices that something is written on the door handle. The inscription reads to open Tunia with a sword when Actila's blood is ready. Most likely, this refers to the blood of Raniero Actilos, Actila's godson. But Eden does not understand what the Sword of Tunia is because such a relic does not exist. He decides to search the vault for documents related to this, and at that moment, someone calls him from behind. The knight asks Eden what he is looking at on the empty wall, which has nothing on it, and they leave. On the second day after the departure of the punitive squad, news came that the sanctuary had been returned earlier than expected. Angelica came to the infirmary as she heard that the wounded knights were the first to return. Noticing the severe wounds on their bodies, the Empress assumed that the operation to exterminate the beasts was very difficult. The knight noted that the battle was not difficult, but he was surprised by Raniero's strategy. The Emperor took away the eggs of the beasts, and after hatching, the young mistook the knights for their parents. After that, Raniero ordered the hungry cubs to be fed their mothers. Hearing this, Sylvia drops the flasks of medicine and, trembling, lowers them to the floor to collect them. Instructing Sison to look after the infirmary, Angelica goes out to bring water to the knights and invites Sylvia with her. The Empress is worried about the maid, but does not know how to tell her to rest, because for a resident of Actilos, this can be humiliating. Suddenly, the girl asks Angelica why she cares so much about her, the daughter of traitors, because she did not deserve it. Sylvia admits that when she heard about the animals, she remembered her image of her mother's killer on the hunt for her own survival. Angelica, touching the girl's shoulder, asks her not to talk about it, and she falls on the shoulder of the Empress with tears in her eyes. The heroine smiles, because the fact that Sylvia showed herself weak in front of her means her complete trust in the mistress. The next day, together with the Archbishop, Angelica visited the returned sanctuary. The Empress asks if she can inspect any books that are stored there, and the bishop allows her to do so. With horror for herself, she learns that Chester was mistaken because all the forbidden books have already been transferred from here, and only those that can be shown to strangers remain. After that, Angelica went to the abandoned sanctuary every day. It was very difficult to read the books because, although there were few of them, many books were damaged and the lines in them were erased. The Empress is standing at the shelves, and suddenly, to her right, a book somehow falls from the shelf by itself. Taking her hands, Angelica freezes in amazement. After all, this is the same novel in which she got into. Leafing through the book, the girl notices that the content in it seems to be different from what she read before. According to the novel, the godson of war has robbed the Shrine of Mercy. The knights of Actila face a storm and are forced to retreat. Seraphine hears the voice of God that an important guest will soon arrive and is waiting for him. Having read to the moment of the murder of the Empress, Angelica becomes ill. Perhaps it's because she's reading the original after a few months with Raniero, but she experiences some kind of feeling of inconsistency with the content. Suddenly, Angelica notices the author's postscript, which seems to have been written especially for her. According to the author, if there were immutable rules in the world he created, Actila's godson would have no choice but to become possessed by Saint Tunia. Even if the characters around them and the conflict relationships around them change, Raniero will definitely meet Serafina and get carried away by her, and this is invariable. Thinking that it is better for her to run away from the Emperor, Angelica suddenly shudders as someone touches her shoulder. Turning around, Angelica sees Raniero returning ahead of schedule. He wonders what kind of book the girl was reading, and when he hears in response that these are canonical commandments, he is surprised, because when he enters, he clearly heard her cursing under her breath. Raniero begins to leaf through the book, and Angelica panics, not knowing how to explain everything to him. Suddenly turning to her, the Emperor asks if she is joking, saying that this is a commandment because there is a blank sheet in front of him. After handing over the book to an uncomprehending Angelica and leaving the sanctuary, Raniero asks if she remembers what she said 10 days ago. He takes her by the hand, and the girl cannot believe that the Emperor returned earlier because of her words about returning home. Sitting in the room on Raniero's lap, Angelica asks how the extermination went. The Emperor tells how he fed the cubs their mothers, regretting that the girl did not see this picture. At night, Angelica cannot sleep because the complexity of the escape increased when she finally realized what Raniero likes. She would not be able to deceive him, and if she suddenly pulled away now, he would definitely suspect something. Until he goes on a winter expedition, she must sincerely love him so that he does not have any doubts that she can leave her loved one. In the morning, it turns out that they are about to go back. Angelica is worried because now she will not have time to talk to Chester about the book. The Empress has no choice but to entrust this matter to Sison. Improving the moment when Raniero will definitely hear their conversation, she calls for a lady-in-waiting and asks her to return to the sanctuary the book she accidentally left behind. When he finishes giving instructions, the Emperor embraces Angelica, glad that they will soon be home again. Shizen, meeting with Eden, asks him to return the book taken by the Empress to the shrine. The lady-in-waiting also gives him the money they took with them and informs him that the escape is planned for December, along with Eden. The book contains a note from Angelica about the author's postscript, which Raniero could not see, but the knight also does not see anything in the book. Eden asks to tell the Empress that there is nothing on the pages, and suddenly the maid asks him about his relationship with Angelica. The girl does not understand why the Empress plans to run away with him in December, if they are in a decent relationship. Eden also finds it strange that Angelica decided to flee because it seemed to him that she planned to stay in Actylos. Seeing that he fails to convince Sison, he explains the Empress's decision to her by saying that they received a prophecy that the Emperor would kill them both. The lady-in-waiting finally understands the reason why the hostess sent her to Eden so often. Sison returns to Angelica to tell her about his conversation with the knight. Now, having learned about the prediction, the maid understands the Empress's decision and supports her. Angelica learns that Eden also saw blank pages in the book, as did Raniero. Sison also tells of a secret door to the shrine that the knight discovered while inspecting the book depository. The lady-in-waiting goes to check the Empress's belongings, and Angelica thinks how it could be that Eden does not see the entry in the book, and she does not see the door. In any case, there is no more time to think. He and Raniero move back to Actylos. Although Actylos led an unprecedentedly peaceful life, after returning from the extermination of animals, Angelica was often tormented by nightmares. Raniero woke her up every time and asked her what she was dreaming, but of course she hid it. The Emperor understood that she was lying, but for some reason he did not interrogate her, but simply hugged and calmed her down. Angelica has noticed that lately Raniero has become condescending if she shows at least a little tenderness. The girl asks him for permission to see the house that is being prepared for Shizen tomorrow, and he allows it, but she must return before sunset. Shizen returns home, where she is greeted by the servants, concerned about her mistress's taciturn lately. The maid asks the butler how he manages to be so calm when the mistress comes home in a bad mood. The guy replies that the others should be less fearful, and goes to his room. Seeing Daniel off with her eyes, the maid thinks about how peculiar he is. Among the workers, he was the only one given a room. His speech was elegant, his actions were noble, and she even thought that he might be a failed aristocrat hiding his identity. But no one knows that he was actually a promising Saint Knight of the Thunia Temple. And in order to keep him closer, the lady-in-waiting, whom Her Majesty trusts the most, has become independent. All the workers in the mansion are those who have no connection to the imperial palace, and all this is a smokescreen so as not to arouse suspicion. No one can even imagine that the Empress, the maidservant, and the exiled Holy Knight are secretly planning their escape. When Eden told Angelica through Sison that he was planning to come to Actylos, she kept wondering how he was going to do it. In the temple, the knight confessed his sin, his love for the saint, and thereby provoked the exile himself. Angelica understands how much Chester wants to return to the original world. He does not care at all about fame and status here. Recently, the Empress's state of mind has noticeably weakened due to the planned escape. However, Raniero, who knows that she is often tormented by nightmares now, no matter what Angelica does not require an explanation. He didn't even find Shizen's independence suspicious either, and so she believed he wouldn't suspect anything. Arriving at the maid of honor's home, Angelica sits down on the sofa in the living room while the girl closes the windows. Eden enters the room with a tray, greeting the Empress, whom he has not seen for a long time. To his remark about Angelica's emaciated appearance, she replies that there is very little time left before Raniero's campaign. The guy admits that at that time he did not say everything about the door he found. Eden wanted to talk about everything in person after he had sorted it out himself, but above all, he wanted to talk about something else. Raniero is overprotective of Angelica, and the guy thinks that the Emperor will want to take her with him on a winter expedition. However, the Empress does not think so because Raniero knows that after returning from the extermination, she does not feel very well. Before the Emperor goes on an expedition, she plans to tell him that she wants to go for treatment, and he will not interfere with it. When Raniero leaves the palace, the escape will begin, but so far Angelica has not decided on her destination. The neighboring countries of Actylos have enhanced border security, and it will not be easy to cross them. Raniero, distracted by Seraphine, may not be looking for Angelica, but the Master of Feud, whom she has chosen for treatment, may act differently. If the Empress was discovered, she would be immediately sent back to the Imperial Palace. Eden believes that this is why they need to go to a place that is close to the border and has a soft relationship with Actylos. He suggests the Temple of Tunia as a place for treatment, and Angelica flares up with indignation because Raniero will be there. Eden asks her to calm down, as they will have to go to the temple anyway, as the door is in an old shrine. Angelica realizes that he is suggesting that they go to the temple first, before the Emperor arrives. Eden is sure that the priests who worship the god of mercy will not reveal that they are hiding there. He tells the Empress about the inscription engraved on the handle of the door to the sanctuary. Eden pondered for a long time what kind of sword it was talking about, and as a result, he came to a conclusion that the girl immediately guesses. There is a high probability that Tunia's sword is Seraphina, because in the original her sword pierced Raniero. Therefore, they need to contact the saint before the Emperor so that after seeing Actyla's blood, taking it to the vault and opening the door, they can find out what is behind it. Angelica thinks sadly about said blood of Actyla, believing that Raniero must die anyway. Eden doesn't know if he has to die, but blood must be spilled anyway. Noticing Angelica's anxiety, he wonders if it bothers her. Raniero, although called the godson of Actyla, is actually considered to be the same entity as God himself. After all, unlike the god Tunia, blood is the only means of communication with the god Actyla, without temples and holy scripture. Angelica is afraid that her negative answer will be regarded as a lie, but still says that her life is the most important thing for her. Eden, who notes to himself the Empress's inability to lie, thinks that she still loves Raniero. The girl had no choice but to pretend that she was creating this appearance on purpose. She asks Eden not to worry about this because she is well aware that her life is the most important thing. He believes that time will tell whether this is love out of necessity or whether it is an excuse for oneself. Angelica decides to ask Eden if he was from a wealthy family or at least if he lived without difficulties. After all, it is possible that his past life was paradise for him, while it was very difficult for her in her present life. That's why she asks Eden to take this into account, noticing that she's hesitant, as the return isn't as pleasant for her as it is for him. Then, in about a month, if everything goes according to the plot, Raniero will go on an expedition to the kingdom of Sombinia. Noticing that the Empress is studying a map of these parts, Sylvia informs her that it takes about 3 weeks to get there. The maid of honor finds it hard to believe that Angelica studies cards just like that. The Emperor enters the study, wondering what they were talking about. Angelica explains to Raniero that she studied the cards in order to familiarize herself with the state of affairs. Having seated the girl at the table, he asks her to share her vision of the situation in this region. In her opinion, winter is not a very good time for an armed conflict. Angelica shows Sombinia, an area at the foot of the mountain, and in fact this is the only route connecting them to Actylos. If Actylos could use it as a stronghold, it would mean that their soldiers would simply be handed over to Sombinia. Angelica knows that it will be difficult to house many soldiers in this place far from the capital in winter, and Raniero is impressed by her knowledge. The girl notes that common sense tells her that there will be no war in the winter, although the borders will be weaker than usual. If he took the chance to break down the wall and demolish the mountain to make a wider road, then Actylos would be able to defeat Sombinia's forces one by one. People of Actylos are born strong and hardy, so if you advance in winter, there is a high probability of a major victory. Raniero admits that he has been waiting for several years, during which the weather conditions were recorded, and the best moment was waiting. He is sure that if this winter is like the previous 10, then this land will become the territory of Actylos. However, Raniero has never discussed this with Angelica, and he wonders how she is so aware of everything. The girl explains that she realized this by thinking about how the emperor does it. He shows Angelica the planned path, which is scheduled for the beginning of December. When she sadly says that the emperor will soon be busy, he asks if he should go. Rushing to hug him, she promises that she will be fine and asks him to just come back quickly. Raniero admits that he would like to take Angelica with him, but she reminds that after the last expedition, she felt bad. The route of the expedition that the emperor showed today is valuable information that will leave the palace thanks to Shizen and go to Eden's room. The emperor hears the maids discussing something animatedly and learns from Angelica that the Duchess of Nurma will soon have a child. Without even congratulating her, Raniero kicks everyone out of the Empress's room and collapses on her bed. Hearing Angelica's joy over Nurma's long-awaited pregnancy, the emperor asks if she wants a child. He notes that if she does give birth, she will need to give birth to many children to test Actala. Angelica wonders if the children she will give birth to should kill each other until they are left alone. After receiving an affirmative answer, she suggests that the child she gave birth to can kill Raniero, as he himself did with the former emperor. However, the emperor is sure that no one can kill him because in Actilos they weed out the weak, even if it is a child. Angelica asks if she can be eliminated, but Raniero points out that she is a member of his family, and the decision on her life or death is only in his jurisdiction. If someone else takes the life of his wife, then he will pay for his reckless courage. Sylvia overhears the other maids talking about harmony between the imperial couple. Since the emperor has come to Angelica again, no one will look for the maid of honor until sunrise. Therefore, Sylvia understands that this is her chance, and she needs to act now. She seems suspicious of the independence of the head maid of honor and the fact that she moved her residence outside the palace. So Sylvia decided to come to Saisen's house to find out something, but when she got there she realized that she was too late. Standing in front of the house, she sees a light in the window which Eden suddenly approaches. Although the changed hairstyle may mislead someone, Sylvia recognizes him as a knight from the Temple of Tunia. Pulling back the curtain, Eden hurriedly knocks on Shizen's room to inform her that one of the Empress's ladies-in-waiting is standing outside. The guy understands that there is a problem because it was obvious that Sylvia recognized him. Eden and Shizen go out to meet the girl, who apologizes to them for the late visit. Entering the house, she admits that she suspected something was wrong and came here, trusting her intuition. Since instead of throwing social events, Angelica studies maps of the area, Sylvia decided that she was forming a coalition. The girl wants them to tell her about their plans, but Eden insists that they are not up to anything. He explains that he is here because he was exiled from the temple and was lucky enough to find a job here. However, Sylvia does not believe a single word and wants to hear the truth. She decides to be the first to show her cards and says that she is not going to interfere with anything, no matter what the mistress is planning. Sylvia admits that she hates the emperor because in his eyes all the people in the world are just toys. What for him is entertainment that relieves boredom, for her it is a scream that she will have to carry with her throughout her life. Therefore, if Angelica wants to stab the emperor in the back, then Sylvia is ready to sacrifice herself for this, no matter what it is. The girl knows that the only one who can destroy him is Her Majesty the Empress. To Eden's remark that Angelica loves Raniero, the girl, bursting into laughter, claims that she cannot love him. According to her, the Empress may be agitated and rely on him for strength, but the fact that she lures him is only a survival strategy. However, according to Eden, if this were the case, the Emperor would immediately suspect her, because he is good at recognizing lies. Sylvia is sure that it is difficult for the Emperor to suspect Angelica because he is head over heels in love with her. Suddenly, Eden decides to inform the girl of his and the Empress's plan to leave Actilos. When the girl asks what will happen next, he says with a smile that the Emperor will need to be killed. Lying in bed and confessing her love to Raniero, Angelica asks if she can leave the capital for a while when he is on the expedition. She is afraid that when he leaves and she has nightmares, no one will wake her up, so she wants to go to recover. The Empress has also decided on the place. It will be the county of Doshino, where Countess Anastasia will take care of her. The Empress seems to Raniero to be a sweet marshmallow who wants to allow everything she asks for. Sitting at the meeting, the Emperor cannot concentrate on the topic of discussion, constantly thinking about Angelica's declarations of love. He declares that the planned hike will go according to plan and without changes and dissolves the meeting. Remembering Nirma's pregnancy, Raniero asks the Duke, who is stunned by the Emperor's personal conversation. The Emperor asks the Duke if he is happy about this event, if he loves his wife, and how he understands that this is love. The matter is complicated, but since there is rarely a chance to talk to the Emperor in person, the Duke decides to avoid words that might upset him. He says that he feels love when he takes his wife for an exceptional being. Love makes you forgive the impossible, be generous to what you may not like. From this, Raniero concludes that the Empress considers him exceptional and unique. Angelica is practicing archery, and the Emperor catches her doing it. Hugging the girl and kissing her, he praises how well she has learned to shoot. He worries if Angelica will be okay while he's gone, but she reassures him. As it turned out, the Emperor was already going to assign an escort to her so that she would be comfortable on the trip. Angelica wants to go with only Sylvia, Sison, and one porter, believing that she will be more comfortable if there are familiar people nearby. She realizes that Raniero will surely put her under surveillance, but she thinks that everything will be fine as long as they are not too close. The days were getting colder, but Actylos's army was well equipped for a surprise attack on Sombinia. Before Actylos's army set off, Angelica was one step ahead and had finished preparing to leave for treatment. She and Raniero say goodbye, and getting into the carriage, the girl leaves for Decino County. After seeing her off, the Emperor is going to hurry since he has decided to conquer Sombinia. The Countess is glad to see the Empress. Although the Duchess of Nirma told her not to behave rashly, it is difficult for her not to worry. The Countess's husband has been cheating on her for a long time. The son also left for another district because he was tired of the marital quarrels of his parents. If it were not for the emerald mine she owns, her father-in-law would have driven her away long ago, and the arrival of such a guest gives her reason to be proud. The Countess would like to inform everyone in the area that the Empress is visiting her, but she has come to have a good rest. The woman wants to get closer to Angelica, but in such a way as not to cause her discomfort. All the best is prepared for the Empress. The servants are also carefully trained in order to avoid mistakes. Angelica is pleased with the reception given to her, and Anastasia is happy to please her. She wonders who this man who came with them is, because all she knows about him is that he was hired by Sison, and his name is Danielle. Judging by the fact that he was accompanying them on this trip, he had been able to gain a lot of trust in a short time. The eyes of the Countess and Daniel constantly collide, and, catching his smile, the woman is embarrassed and blushes. As it turned out, seducing the Countess, who has been living a lonely life for a long time because of her husband's infidelity, was part of Angelica's plan. The plan succeeded, and at night Daniel found himself in the bedroom of the Countess, seduced by the attention of a charming man. When the woman fell asleep, he carefully opened the drawer of her chest of drawers and found there the keys for which everything was started. In the morning, the Countess discovers the loss and realizes with horror that Daniel could have been the robber last night. She is about to run to him to investigate, but the Empress comes out to meet her, who wants to talk to her about something. Anastasia asks to postpone the conversation because of an urgent matter, but suddenly Angelica hands her the same bunch of keys. According to the Empress, the woman dropped them yesterday while taking off her coat, but then she remained silent so as not to embarrass her. The Countess does not remember that she carried the keys with her yesterday, but the Empress would not steal them, and the woman thanks her. Angelica invites her to drink tea together before dinner, and the Countess accepts the honor bestowed upon her. There are several reasons why the Empress chose this county to escape. Firstly, it is located to the north of the capital, and from here it will be possible to go to the Temple of Tunya without crossing the mountain. Secondly, although Anastasia is a rich woman, her position in the family is quite precarious, and she will have to do everything that Angelica says to gain influence through her. Sitting over tea, the Empress complains to the Countess that there are too many strangers in the mansion, which makes her dizzy. The woman, trying to please her, reports a quiet villa nearby where Her Majesty can settle. In fact, this villa on the edge of the estate was chosen as the starting point of escape by Zizan and Eden well in advance of their trip. Although living in this villa was Angelica's original intention, she is somehow embarrassed to watch how the Countess tries to win her favor. In response to her proposal to post guards near the house, the Empress refuses because she herself is an excellent archer. If the Countess allows the Empress to stay in the villa with only her attendants, she promises to fulfill one of her wishes. Angelica likes that the villa is located away from the mansion, and the fence is so high that it is very difficult to look behind it. Now the Empress only has to ask the Countess to understand her desire to be alone and give her the keys to the villa. Finally, the four of them are left, and Angelica notices that Sylvia seems very inspired. The Empress is very worried, as Eden has included her escape plan without even consulting. After making sure that everything is going smoothly so far, they sit down to rest, and Angelica thinks how difficult it is for her to lie. Every day after the Empress's departure, Raniero continues to come to her palace. The servants had heard that he slept there every day, and they were already worried about whether he was all right. Before leaving this place tonight, Angelica turns to Sison with a request. She asks to bring her writing utensils to write a letter to the Emperor. In it, she writes that she has made it to the county well, that she does not have nightmares here, and that she will soon recover. According to Angelica, when His Majesty's expedition is over, she wants to train again to prepare for the upcoming hunt. Reading her letter, Raniero thinks of picking up Angelica on his way to the capital after conquering the territory of Sombinia. According to Eden, 4 people can attract a lot of attention, so they should be divided into 2 groups. First, he and the Empress would travel north, and then a week later, Sylvia and Sison would travel south. While packing her things, Angelica worries that something may go wrong and she may be recognized and revealed. Noticing her anxiety, Sison reassures the mistress, because soon they will definitely be able to meet at the temple. Angelica hugs her devoted assistant, to whom she could not admit until the very end that she is not who she pretends to be. The Empress mounts her horse, and Sylvia asks if she can handle everything. Angelica wishes the maids good luck, and she and Eden hit the road. The closer the checkpoint, the more nervous the Empress becomes, and now they finally get to it. Angelica feels nauseous from the experience, but Eden doesn't think of lingering. The guard who stopped them demands to see the pass, and they hand him the token stolen from the Countess. Eden informs the guards that he and his wife are engaged in trade and have come from south to north to take care of his sick mother. However, the guard, smiling maliciously, asks not to take him for a fool, because merchants do not have such a white and pretty face. Angelica finds it strange that this man does not arrest them on the spot and does not call others for help. She decides to intervene and admires the work of the guard, who works late into the night for the benefit of Actelos. Angelica left most of her jewelry, afraid that they would be opened, but took a gold bracelet with her, which she now decided to give to the guard. The man checks the metal for a tooth and, having made sure of its authenticity, lets the travelers pass. Driving through the gate, Angelica suddenly begins to cry and asks Eden not to turn around. He does not understand what her mood is connected with and whether he should console her, but she asks him to continue on his way. Travelers ride out onto a field dotted with shining flowers, and for a moment they freeze from this beauty. At one point, Eden thinks the Empress is crying again, but when he turns around, he sees her laughing. For some reason, a feeling of great relief overwhelms the girl, from which she is unable to hold back her emotions. All her past days had been occupied with strenuous attempts to stay alive. Angelica constantly tried to avoid crises and remain smart, without losing vigilance. But now it doesn't matter if she screams or runs, because for the first time she felt completely free. Meanwhile, a servant sent by the Countess knocks on the door to find out if everything is all right with the Empress. He brings a package to Angelica, but Sison, taking the basket, sees off the intruder. Sylvia is happy about this visit because it means that no one knows that the Empress and Eden left the villa last night. The decision to make a week's gap between their departures was made in order to create an alibi for the Empress. After all, when ladies-in-waiting show themselves to people living in a villa, it is natural to assume that it is there. But when the ladies-in-waiting disappear, it will be unclear exactly when Angelica's entourage left the county, leading to confusion in the search. Sitting at a halt, the Empress is worried about meeting Seraphine, but Eden advises her not to worry. He also advises the girl not to think about Raniero if possible, because if she has even a modicum of feelings for him, then it can be painful. At night, sitting by the fire, Angelica suddenly feels someone approaching and asks Eden to check his weapon. Startled, he asks her how she understood this, and then the Empress, who is pulling the bowstring, is attacked. The girl immediately shoots and kills one of the attackers, who turns out to be their leader. Another is killed by Eden with his sword, but not calculating his strength, he sticks the weapon so deep that he cannot pull it out. The guy is wounded in the arm, but Angelica manages to cover him, killing this attacker as well. Having finished with the bandits, the girl treats the wound of Eden, who does not understand how she guessed about the attack. Apparently, due to the fact that she was in Actelos for a long time, Angelica's intuition became much stronger. Although they did not manage to get a good rest, they decide to continue their journey to the temple as soon as possible. Meanwhile, the Countess, one after another, receives refusals to meet with the Empress, who refers to poor health. Although Sylvia and Sison had extra passes stolen by Eden, they did not pass the checkpoint, but moved through a loophole that the locals secretly used. When it came to paying bribes, Sison paid sparingly, so the search team would follow their trail, assuming that only the Empress could pay that way. Raniero sees Angelica in a dream, who confesses her love to him and wakes up because he has never dreamed of anything before. He feels the breath of the devil behind him, who whispers to him to forget all this and remember only the war, blood, and screams. Although the speed of the squad is slower than when marching to the Temple of Tunya, His Majesty's army is confidently moving forward. The morale of the soldiers is now at the highest level, as they were very much looking forward to conquering the lands of Sombinia. It is this unhurried movement that makes them become more ruthless. Raniero is confident that when the battle begins, the enemy army will be easily captured. The devil is pleased because away from Angelique, the Emperor has again begun to obey him well. Duchess Nirma is informed of the Countess's visit, and she is angry because now Anastasia must receive the Empress. In the living room, she meets an alarmed woman who shouts that she and the Duchess have been deceived. The Countess tells how the Empress asked to lend her a villa, and she herself disappeared. Nirma is seized with horror because, knowing how much the Emperor values his wife, everyone who is associated with her disappearance will be destroyed. Gathering her thoughts, she tells the Countess to calm down and decides to sort things out before the Emperor returns. Anastasia suspects that Angelica left the county a long time ago, although the Empress's disappearance was discovered this morning. After listening to her story, Nirma decides to check all the passes, because the fugitives could forge documents. She also orders to investigate the illegal road used by poor residents. Angelica and Eden continue on their way, but the weather is very cloudy, and the guy is afraid that it may start snowing. The Empress thinks that everything will work out, and this time Eden easily trusts her intuition. The girl does not leave the feeling that someone is whispering words in her ear, following which their path turns out to be easier. Once again, listening to the voice and heading in the direction indicated by him, they see an abandoned house in front of them. Entering inside and looking around, the travelers, finding that there is no one here, decide to spend the night in the house. Eden goes in search of wood for the stove and asks Angelica to tie up the horses for the time being. Being under the roof and warming herself from the warmth of the fire, the girl feels much calmer. Eden starts a conversation with her about her former life and is surprised to notice that she has barely managed to remember her real name. Angelica reminds him that her past life was not so rosy, but nevertheless she runs away from here because she cannot be sure of this life either. Eden confesses to the girl that he is actually a child from a wealthy family, as she assumed. Angelica, laughing, asks if he admitted it to show off to her. Suddenly, leaning over her, Eden asks if he will give her a promise that he will help her with the money, the confidence to go back. He tells her Sylvia's words that Angelica does not love the Emperor and that she chose him only to protect herself. Perhaps these words were true, because once here the girl made every effort not to hurt Raniero's feelings and save herself. And after she won his favor and began to live a normal life, she convinced him and avoided everything she did not want to do. Getting close to Angelica and wrapping his hands around her face, Eden asks if she will really be okay if Raniero dies. As he expected, it is difficult for her to answer this question, and perhaps she is deceived by the instinct of self-preservation, but she is definitely sure that his death will not be something joyful for her. And yet Angelica is not sure that she will be sad and suffer because of this for the rest of her life. Although his face constantly pops up in the girl's memory during such conversations, but this is because she still has a feeling of affection. However, the moment she overcame these feelings and escaped from Actelos, the feeling of relief was also very sincere. After all, the nightmare that had been shackling her all this time had disappeared since that very day. It's the 17th day since we escaped from Villa Docino, and the weather is getting harsher, but there's not much time left to go. Eden worries that they will arrive later than expected and may encounter the Emperor in the temple. However, the voice enveloping Angelica whispers to her that this will not happen. The girl no longer feels her legs and cannot go further, so Eden takes her in his arms because she cannot stop here. And finally, frozen and tired, the travelers reach the Temple of Tunia and go inside. The Archbishop meets them and asks Eden what happened to him and why he returned. Angelica reminds the bishop who she is and tells him about her escape from Actelos. Kneeling down, she asks the servants of God for mercy, lodging, and food. Eden asks the Empress to come to her senses, but the girl lies on the floor completely exhausted. Suddenly, she finds herself remembering Raniero's face again, and she doesn't know why, because she's really afraid of him. However, memories one after another appear in front of her eyes, and she loses consciousness. When Angelica comes to, she cannot understand where she is, because the room of the temple in which she and Raniero stayed looked different. The door opens and Serafina appears on the threshold with a plate of food, explaining that this is her room. Meanwhile, at the foot of the mountain, near the border of Sombinia, bad weather prevents the Imperial army from advancing further. Raniero decides to return, but supplies may run out, so they need to stop at the Temple of Tunia on the way. After feeding Angelica, Seraphine wonders how the girl managed to move through the frosty wasteland for 17 days. The saint asks the Empress to tell her why she fled from Actelos. Initially, Seraphine was supposed to be spoken to by Eden, but now he is lying exhausted, and Angelica asks if he has spoken to the saint. Seraphine confesses her feelings of inadequacy regarding this guy, because the man who despised her was suddenly expelled from the temple for confessing her feelings for the saint. She realizes that this cannot be a coincidence, because a few months later he returned to the temple with the Empress. Therefore, Seraphine could not meet Eden. She was scared and sad. As expected, unlike what she read in the novel, the emotions of a person who is very close to her are felt by Angelica in a completely different way. She finally decides to briefly tell Seraphine that the Emperor of Actylos will soon arrive at the temple. Suddenly, beginning to suffocate and horrified by what she is about to say, Angelica asks the saint to kill him. The girl is trembling all over. Raniero's gentle voice is heard in her head. She asks Serafina for mercy. Saint Tunia asks her to calm down, but Angelica insists that it's in her best interest too. However, she cannot say out loud that Raniero will try to dishonor and destroy Seraphine, so she only says that it is also for Eden's sake. When asked how she knows all this, Angelica tells about the book of prophecies that she found in the sanctuary. Taking a book out of her bag, the Empress shows it to the saint, warning that only she herself can read what she has written. Opening the book, Seraphine is convinced that the pages in it are indeed empty. According to Angelica, Eden is also aware of this prophecy, as according to it, he must die at the hands of Raniero. Seraphine is shocked by what she hears, but the Empress realizes that it is hard to believe. Angelica also says that according to the prophecy, she must die first. The saint, to the surprise of the Empress, easily accepted her story, saying that she believed her and that she was very sorry. Lying in bed, Angelica reflects on Seraphina's reaction, because although the saint understands her, for some reason all this seems wrong to her. Leaving the temple in front of a crowd of people, Seraphine announces the imminent arrival of a large army of the Emperor in the temple. Tunia has already received help from Raniero, and now they shouldn't turn their backs on those who ask for help in bad weather. People are worried, but everything the saint says is akin to dogma, and they are discussing how to deploy the army. After witnessing Seraphine's speech to the people, Eden realizes that she has begun to act. Raniero, knocking on the door of the church, learns from the Archbishop that they already knew about his imminent arrival. Sitting in the chapel where strangers do not enter, Angelica hears a noise outside and realizes that the Emperor has already arrived. From the day she had been locked up in the chapel, she had thought of Raniero leaving as soon as possible, but 3 days had passed and he had not left the temple. No one visited the room, but a plate of food was always left next to the door. According to the original story, the two should have already had a fateful meeting, and Angelica doesn't understand why he's still here. Suddenly, the door to the chapel opens. The girl jumps up, believing that Seraphine has returned, but it turns out to be Eden. When he learns that the saint has not appeared here for 3 days, The guy is angry, not understanding where she has gone. Eden wants to go in search of her, but Angelica grabs his hand and asks him to stay, asking if the Emperor is still there. Clutching his head, he reports that the situation has changed, and Raniero has not yet seen Serafina. It seems to Eden that the saint who was supposed to greet the Emperor in the temple is deliberately avoiding him. The guy is going to change the original plan and get into the sanctuary before Serafina kills Raniero. 10,000 soldiers are stationed in Tunia and the surrounding villages who live and eat in private houses. When the archbishop said that they simply couldn't take care of everyone, the emperor threw a bag of coins on the ground. However, people here live thanks to exchange, and gold has no value for them, and Raniero, knowing this, did so intentionally. Either way, if Seraphine kills the emperor and the soldiers are left without a leader, they will destroy the place, so he and Angelica must leave before that happens. Eden asks the girl to focus on only two things now, the blood of Actylos and the sword of Tunia. Suddenly, the guy asks Angelica to be silent for a minute because it seems to him that there is someone nearby. Raniero appears around the corner, thinking he heard his wife's voice.